Hello.
Last.
Oh, cool. We got there.
Hello.
Thank you guys so much for putting all this together.
Thanks for being so patient.
We got there. Woohoo!
All right, everyone. This is Amy Atwater from the Museum of the Rockies, talking about research on extinct bone-crushing dogs. Super cool. So, yeah.
Hey, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out today and joining us. This is a fantastic cause. I want to do a shout out to all of the organizers for all of your hard work. This is incredible and a really fun idea and for an incredibly good cause. So huge applause to all of our organizers. Thank you so much. My name is Amy Atwater. I am the Paleontology Collections Manager and Registrar at Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, where I am now. That's a Triceratops. I deal with lots of Triceratops at Museum of the Rockies. We have the largest collection of Triceratops fossils in the world, and that's about the only dinosaurs I'm going to be talking about today. For the rest of my time, I'm going to be talking about bone-crushing dogs, or Borophagines, as they're scientifically known as. They're an extinct group of canids that were endemic to North America and thrived here, especially during the Miocene time period. This is a replica or a cast of the skull that I'm currently researching, MOR 8673, a spectacular skull with all of the teeth preserved that show all of that bone crushing ability. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we're gonna jump right in. All right, so bad to the bone crushing dog and the evolution of canids in Montana. Specifically, that's what I work on. I work on bone crushing dogs and specimens that are from Montana, but also parts of Idaho in the northern Rocky Mountain region. Again, I am the Paleontology Collections Manager and Registrar at Museum of the Rockies. We're a part of Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. If you have any questions or want to talk to me about dogs or science communication, you can shoot me an email at amy.atwater@montana.edu or hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, where I'm very active. So today we're going to be talking about bone crushing dogs and how did I become interested? Well, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. I went to school at the University of Oregon, go Ducks. I spent my summers at summer camps in the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument in Eastern Oregon, which is an incredible monument preserving almost all of the Cenozoic. So tons and tons of amazing mammal evolution. I remember as a kid being fascinated by oreodonts and hell pigs and saber-toothed cats and thunder beasts. And I really didn't even know that dinosaurs were as popular as they are. I thought everyone was about Smilodon and things like that, which is still true. Okay, today we're going to be talking about dogs of Montana specifically. And as we do that, we're going to be talking about the evolution of dogs and their place in the carnivoran family tree. We're going to be talking about the fossil record of dogs and where we find a lot of our fossil dogs. And then we're going to dive into the specific subfamilies of the canid group. So those are Hesperocyonines, our most basal dogs that we have in North America. Then we're going to talk a lot about Borophagines, like this guy, the bone-crushing dogs, and talk about the current research that we have going on at Museum of the Rockies, and then end with a little bit on modern dogs. We're really not going to be talking a lot about modern dogs today, and I have a few slides on science communication if we get to those. So Bozeman, where Museum of the Rockies is founded, is very much a dog town, and it's a dog town in more than one way. Not only do we see puppers running around all the peaks and trails around here, but there's also lots of fossil dogs beneath our feet. All of the specimens that you see here came from Southwest Montana, and a lot came from the near Bozeman area, especially the one in the middle there. The skull that I showed you earlier, that specimen came about 20 minutes west of Bozeman. So when we talk about dogs, we do need to talk about where they fall in their doggo family tree. So dogs are carnivorans, which means they are members of the order Carnivora. And there's Mr. Bubs there, looking adorable. And then on the right, you can see a evolutionary tree. This is actually the bear family tree by artist Ray Troll, but it shows a lot of the carnivorans on there. And that's what I really wanted to highlight So you can see some of those relationships, obviously a lot of the bears. We can also see that other carnivorans include things like pinnipeds, which are going to be your walruses and seals and sea lions. And we also have things, of course, like mustelids and procyon, so raccoons, and also things like weasels and otters. And then we also have cats and dogs and scary things like bear dogs. So again, carnivorans are split into two suborders. We have the Feliforma, which are the cat-like carnivorans, and then we have the Caniforma, which are the dog-like carnivorans. You can see them there on the right side of the screen. I am not embarrassed to admit that I was well into my 20s before I learned that hyenas are actually more closely related to cats than they are to dogs. That was definitely a mind-blown moment. And things that unite all of these critters that you see on your screen here have to do with a lot of claws and teeth and different adaptations for catching and hunting and eating other animals for dinner. So how do they go about doing this? And another way we can recognize carnivorans is because of their teeth. One of my favorite things in the world, teeth. And so we can see that there's this complex that we see in carnivorans called carnassials. This is a combination of the upper premolar and the lower first molar coming together to form this extreme shearing blade that you see here on your screen. And these are specially adapted for shearing and slicing through meat. However, while all carnivorans are going to have the carnassial complex, not all carnivorans actually use them to eat meat. And some are completely herbivorous, some are omnivorous. And then, of course, there's other animals out there, like T-Rex, that would have been a carnivore that didn't have a carnassial complex. So things can get a little tricky when we have a name like carnivorans. So here to show that confusion, if you will, carnivoran versus carnivore. So here on the left, you can see a panda bear. They are a carnivoran. They are bears. They have teeth that look very well adapted for eating an omnivorous diet like most bears have. However, pandas pretty much only eat bamboo, which is grass. So they are pretty much an herbivorous carnivoran. And then on the right, you can see a carnivorous non-carnivoran, the orca whale, hunting another carnivoran, just to make things extra confusing. Why not? So to recap, carnivoran is an order of mammals that are united by their evolutionary tree and their characteristics like having that carnassial. Carnivore means you eat meat, and it's a dietary categorization. So it can be a little confusing, but that is the basis of what dogs fall in with their dog family tree. So when we talk about the fossil record of dogs, we see the earliest carnivorans arising in North America during the Eocene, best time period ever, which is about 56 to 34 million years ago. So here on the right, you can see this diagram by Megan Weatherall, and it shows the red line through there is dissolved oxygen to give you an idea of climate. So you can see that we're looking at a peak right around that time in the Eocene. It did get very, very warm, and that warming trend made it so that even the poles, like in the Arctic Ocean, were available for life, including things like primates. We find primates thus far north in the Arctic from this time period because it was warm enough. So a lot of modern animals that we see today really blossomed during this period of Earth's history, likely due to the good climate. So now when we dive into dogs, we're going to talk about the dog family, which is Canidae, and how it contains three subfamilies. So we have the Hesperocyonines, we have the Borophagines, and then we have the Canines. So out of those, two of the three subfamilies are completely extinct today. So while I may call my dog a bone-crushing dog, she is technically still a canine, though she does do amazing things to bones. So when we put this in geologic time and space, I really like this graphic because it shows the first occurrence of canids in North America were the Hesperocyonines, and they actually gave rise to the other two groups, the Borophagines and the Canines. So the Hesperocyonines show up right there in that Eocene time period, and they do okay during the Oligocene and part of the Miocene before they go extinct. Then we have the Borophagines that show up right at the end of the Eocene, and they persist into the Pliocene. And then we have the modern dogs, which they show up pretty early. They're in the Oligocene where they show up, but they still persist to this day. So to give you a reference of the timing and space. What did some of these earliest dogs look like? Well, here is the first dog. And by dog with quotation marks, I mean that it is probably the earliest canid. It is not the earliest canine. I apologize if that gets confusing. So this is Hesperocyon wilsoni, which is from Southwest Texas. I did a lot of field work in Southwest Texas for graduate school, so I'm familiar. This is about a 40 million year old specimen. And it can be very tricky to understand at the base of a evolutionary tree if this was an early weasel per se, or even an early dog, because they had so many characteristics in common. So what made Hesperocyon wilsoni fall within the dog family is the loss of the upper third molar. So they do not have their wisdom teeth on their upper teeth for all doggos, including your dogs today. And then what we also see has to do with the inner ear. So it's there, and it's an enlarged bony bola, which is that rounded part down here. That's the bola, the auditory bola. And that is a rounded covering that covers the middle ear. So the middle ear is very specific in dogs with what bones compose that auditory bola, and also the size helps us understand special characteristics around dogs, with probably having an important adaptation for being able to hear from very, very early on, as early as 40 million years ago. So when I was a graduate student in West Texas, I found this canine at one point while doing quarry work in Big Bend National Park. And I like to imagine that maybe it could be from something like Hesperocyon. So perhaps. So if we look at the evolutionary tree or phylogenetic tree or cladogram here, this would be right there at the base. This is even before true Hesperocyonines come onto the scene. And this is going to be at that split between dogs and bears, but closer to the dog side than to the bear side. So now we're going to dive in and go through those different subfamilies. So first is the Hesperocyonines. They are the oldest and most basal of the dogs, I should say. So as I said earlier, they gave rise to the two other groups of canids. They do show up in the Eocene time period. Again, they go extinct in that middle Miocene. They would have been relatively small and maybe in like the fox size area. Supposedly they resembled modern civets. I hope they had color markings on their coats that were that amazing, because that makes me very happy to think about. And even as early as the Hesperocyonines, scientists have hypothesized that they would have been capable of hunting prey larger than themselves. So that's kind of an aspect of dogs that's not necessarily a bony characteristic, but is a behavioral characteristic that is important for our understanding of doggos, as we do know today that dogs will hunt in packs and be able to take down prey larger than themselves. We have one specimen that's a Hesperocyanine. It's probably Hesperocyon gregarious. This is about 30 million years old. So you're looking at most of a cranium, most of a skull, and one part of the lower jaw, one side of the lower jaw. It's a pretty flat skull. We don't see a lot of doming yet. The auditory bola is still bulbous, but not nearly as enlarged. There is a reduction of that upper M3 in the maxilla. And this one was found near Pipestone Spring, Montana. It was also found at a site with an oreodont and a rabbit, to give you an idea of the other animals that would have been around at that time. So sheep, pig, camel mammals, and some rabbits as well as a lot of other things too, that they were probably hunting and eating. So now we're going to dive into the bone crushing dogs. So they are a subfamily, again, of canids. They lived only in North America, and they were here from about 36 million years ago to 2.5 million years ago. And they are known for having powerful jaws and teeth and going into a hypercarnivorous morphology. I personally am interested in the bone crushing dogs because of my own connection to having a dog that herself likes to act like a bone crushing dog. I laughed really hard when I found this image by Mauricio Antone, because I have a picture of Freya here, my dog, looking exactly like that, carrying the leg of a deer. I have no idea where she got the leg of a deer, but she did, and she was very disappointed when I took it away from her. So how do we know that they ate bones? This is a question I get pretty often. You know, we call them bone crushing dogs. It's so metal. It's so cool. How do we know that they ate bones? Well, I've been working with Dr. Wang at the Natural History Museum of LA. He is the expert of all experts on Borophagines, and he's helping me describe this new specimen we're working on. And he and his colleagues recently came out with a paper that was describing how they know they ate bones, because the proof is in the pooping. That's right. He gave this talk at SVP a couple years ago too. So it's actually through looking at the fossil feces or coprolites that will help confirm the diet of these bone-crushing dogs. So they actually took a bunch of borophagine coprolites, CT scanned them, and then sectioned out all of the bone chunks in it to show they really were eating bone. And also, what a fantastic title. I love it. When we come back to SciComm, those are great little ideas for I almost said nugget, and then I realized that that's also really funny and ironic, so apologies on that nugget of information there for us to come back to. So again, this is the object of my affection these days. This is MOR 8673. You just saw a cast of this earlier. It's a complete skull and jaws. Every single tooth position is present on this dog and is completely unworn. This dog was probably about 1 year old when it died. It was discovered in the mid-2000s, and it was excavated and prepared by Don Lofgren and the ALF Museum and the Webb Schools from Southern California. So shout out to them. Thank you for your amazing work. And it is from a locality that is in the Middle Miocene, about 20 miles west of Bozeman. And one of our, in our project we're working on right now, we're actually looking at detrital zircon geochronology of this site so we can narrow it down to exactly how old this doggo would have been. So the question remains, what is MOR 8673? Is it a new species? Does it belong with something else? So what we use in mammal paleontology, as well as all paleontology, is looking at a lot of characteristics in the skull and the teeth. That's all I have of this specimen. I don't have any postcrania. And we're looking at things that unite it as a dog, such as having an ectotympanic that forms a full ring. That is a characteristic we see in more of these derived borophagines. We see a ramus, so at the symphysis, at the lower jaw here, there's no flange where the two jaws meet. We see a very tall height in the ramus here that probably has a lot to do with physics and having a good bite force. And those are sorts of characters. And then as well, teeth, of course. We can see that the P4 is not enlarged relative to the P3. We can see that the P3 and the P4 haven't gone into this really inflated hypercarnivory zone. They're still relatively normally proportioned. So all of these indicators show us that while this dog is definitely a bone-crushing dog, it hadn't quite gotten to the really hypercarnivorous bone-crushing features that I'll show you in just a moment here. So talking about hypercarnivorous, I guess I should go back to say that 8673, we are pretty sure that it is a new species, and we're working on the description and the systematic paleo on that right now and running some phylogenetic analyses. So hopefully we'll have a paper out in the next year or so that is describing that specimen. Another specimen that's already been published is Alurodon montanensis. This is from outside of Pipestone as well, here in Southwest Montana. It has it's around the same age as 8673, so middle Miocene, about 16 million years old. And what's really fascinating on it is it's way bigger than 8673. It's much larger in all dimensions. And then what we also see are these really cool hypercarnivorous features, like a lengthened shearing blade on the carnassial, so increasing that shearing surface, and then a reduction of grinding of the molars. They're not really interested in doing like a grinding omnivorous thing because they're eating meat and bones. So it's hypercarnivory, and we see lengthening of the shearing blades and an overall expansion of the tooth size, i.e. like more inflated and more robust, especially in those premolars. So between the canine and the molars, we really see those premolars start to really get much, much larger, which is more bite force to be able to withstand trying to crunch through bone. So an example of hypercarnivory, this is a hyena eating a pig neck. This is from Jack Sang. He works at Berkeley and researches all sorts of incredible bite force mechanics in carnivorans. So I'm gonna see if this video is gonna cooperate, and hopefully you can hear the noises. So, as you maybe saw, because it happened so fast, that hyena wolfed down a pig neck in under 30 seconds and made it look real easy too. Just sideways bite, swallow, bite, swallow. And hyenas, even though they're more closely related to cats, have dentition that is very similar to what we see in these hypercarnivorous borophagines, which is really big bulbous premolars and lengthened shearing blades. So if that doesn't give you some respect for bone crushing, I don't know what will. It's really, really cool. Okay. Another borophagine specimen that we have that I'm very excited about is this one. We call it Little Dog. I'm very excited because we have more than just cranial material, more than just teeth. We actually have postcrania, which is very exciting. It is very, very small. Again, it's not going into the hypercarnivorous morphology at this point. We're talking something that would have been more like a fox-sized animal here. So I'm excited to learn more about Little Dog and have some more parts of the skeleton to work with. And so those really show off our specimens that we have at Museum of the Rockies. Of course, there's lots more out there. Of course, canines are the dogs that survived. We still have them around today. So Leptoscion is the earliest known canine at about 34 million years old. So right there at the end of the Eocene, beginning of the Oligocene. It's very fox-like, very slender. Characteristics that we see in modern dogs is that they have slender, elongated limbs that are more elongated compared to what we see in Borophagine and Hesperocyonines. We also see that the front and hind big toe is either completely gone or very, very much reduced. And so that is another characteristic that unite our canines and our furred friends that hopefully we all have at home. So apparently, I again don't know a ton about canines, but from my reading, they split about 12 million years ago into canini, which is essentially most dogs, wolves, domestic dogs, coyotes, jackals, African wild dogs, and South American dogs like the maned wolf, one of my favorites. And then also vulpini, which is all foxes. So that happened about 12 million years ago. And today here in Montana, we do have incredible diversity of canines. We have wolves and foxes and coyotes. We have a wolf that comes through our yard occasionally, and it makes me very happy. All right. So now I'm going to, okay, I forgot about this slide. I'm glad I included it. So if you're curious about other places where we find Borophagines and Hesperocyonines, this map can give you an idea. Some other major hotspots are, of course, the La Brea tar pits. They also have a lot of canine material and like dire wolves. So those are modern canines. Also Barstow, California, we get a lot of Borophagines there. Of course, got a shout out to my backyard of John Day Fossil Beds National Monument in Oregon, also the Badlands National Park, and pretty much all of Nebraska has a lot of fossil dogs as well. So if you're curious, hit up some museums in these places. I also had no idea that Florida had so many specimens. So definitely go check out the doggos that you can see at museums in these locations, or try to learn more about the doggos in your backyard. So now I was just going to take a minute to talk briefly about science communication here at the end of my time here. I'm very, very passionate about science communication, and it's something that I work pretty hard on through social media specifically. So I'm just going to do a recap of maybe you follow me on Instagram. My handle is Mary Anning's Revenge. I really show a lot of features of what my life is like being a paleontology collections manager. It is a mission of mine to highlight specimens that are in collections that may not be seen by the general public on display on exhibit. And I think it's a really important way to be able to get the public to be able to see their specimens. These are all publicly owned, either through the state or federal government. And I am but a steward for these fossil resources. And it is my goal to try and educate folks about not only dinosaurs, but those are of course really fun, but all sorts of extinct life that we have in Montana and through my studies at Texas and other places as well. I do a little bit of this on Twitter as well, but my namesake, Mary Anning's Revenge, really does come from Mary Anning. Mary Anning was a paleontologist who was, she was born in 1799, and so she lived during the early 1800s, and she was an incredible self-taught paleontologist. She was very poor, she was a woman, she was a dissenter from the church, her family, so all of these things were knocks against her for getting any credit for her work. She found, her and her brother found the first complete ichthyosaur. She found the first complete plesiosaur, the first plesiosaur ever. People did not believe her. She had to go through a lot of work of drawing and anatomy and dissection to really prove to folks that she knew what she was talking about and that the discoveries she was making were new and important. She helped us understand that animals really did go extinct. Prior to her work, folks were like, oh, that exists somewhere. So that really helped. Her work really did help influence evolution by natural selection. So she is an unsung hero. A lot of folks have heard of her nowadays, though she still doesn't get the credit she deserves. And that's why my Instagram name is in her honor. It's to promote the work of all paleontologists, especially underrepresented groups, to make sure that no one has the same fate as Mary with someone taking credit for their discoveries. So what does that look like? That means that I really am passionate about sharing about paleontologists who also happen to be women. I do have issues with being called a woman in paleontology sometimes because that sounds like oil and water, things that don't mix. I'm a paleontologist. My peers are paleontologists. We also happen to be women. So that is an important part of my work and what I really want to show through science communication and social media. And then for me personally, I'm a big promoter of positive mental health and taking care of not only your physical health, but your mental health. And it can be a little bit of a vulnerable thing to share to lots and lots of other people, but it's a very powerful message. And it has been very meaningful to get feedback that other people have sought out mental health resources or felt like it was okay because I was sharing my own experiences. So those are kind of the things that I like to highlight on my level as a paleontology collections manager and a science communicator. And if you are aspiring to be a social media SciCommer, science communicator, some of my tips are, I mean, some make a lot of sense. Obviously, you should post what you're passionate about. You should, if you have a unique viewpoint, if you really think that teeth are just the coolest thing ever, then maybe you promote all sorts of different amazing cool teeth. Or if you're really into osteology, or maybe you're really into paleo art. Maybe you're really into following along current events in paleontology and posting about the hottest new research paper. Whatever you do, post what you're passionate about. I'm passionate about my life as a collections manager and as a woman in science, as well as passionate about taking care of your mental health too. I'd also say that I do encourage quality over quantity. If you put a lot of time and effort into your posts, that comes across, and really, really make sure it is conveys the perspective that you want and the information that you want, and make sure that it is accurate. And also, if you can do a land acknowledgement, that's amazing. If you need to cite your artists, you need to cite papers that are helping you with this. There's a lot of ways to really be a conscientious community member through SciComm. So I'd also encourage you to find your unique audience. Do you want to be targeted towards a general museum audience? Do you want to be targeted towards kids and schools? Maybe you want to be more of an adult audience and use different language. That's all fine, but try to stay consistent. I do encourage everyone to minimize their jargon as much as possible. And when you do use jargon, always define it immediately. SciComm, if it's a really great opportunity to share your knowledge. And I guarantee you, conveying your information at a general audience level does not make you sound dumb. It actually makes you sound very smart to be able to take your very complicated ideas and make it available to a general audience. I think that is really, really powerful thing and overlooked a lot. And definitely don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Like I was saying with mental health, that's how I've made a lot of important connections and collaborations. And that's been really powerful and meaningful. And that has helped me with my last one here, which is network and collaborate with your community. The SciComm community in paleontology is very robust and amazing and full of wonderful individuals. Start networking with these folks, retweet, repost, comment, share, be an active participant in your community. And I think that all of those go hand in hand. Really just share what you're passionate about. And paleontology is already a very charismatic science. So a lot of the hard work has already been done for us because our critters are so cool. So it's just up to us to make the learning accessible to a broad audience. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. Feel free to give me a follow on the socials. And if I have a chance for any questions, I will take them. Thank you. And you can just look at the bone crushing dog in the meantime. Yeah.
Super cool. Is that a replica skull?
Yes. Yep. This one's a replica we use at the museum. I've been working from home, but I've been writing up the manuscript on this dog, so I needed a replica to be able to use for reference. And now it's going to eat the Triceratops.
Sure. All right, checking the chat for questions.
Okay, well, just gonna everyone should take this time to go donate as well. T-Rex says go donate.
Yeah, definitely go donate.
Donate.
Check the about on the stream page. There we go. There's the link. Any questions, anyone?
You can email me or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram.
Oh, somebody just asked, is there anything unique about the enamel of the teeth that makes them robust?
That is a fantastic question. I am pretty darn sure that you end up, that those dogs have gone towards a thicker enamel in general. A lot of animals that do a lot of heavy crushing with their teeth, like Paranthropus, a fossil hominid, they have really thick enamel, and I'm pretty sure that the bone crushing dogs also have a thicker enamel in general relative to the average mammalian tooth for sure. And then that specimen has really interesting colors in the enamel. It preserved in a way that that obviously the replacement was doing this interesting kind of color swirl between black and caramel. And I would love to learn more about taphonomy to understand why it looks so pretty.
Philiceratops asks, how are you able to work in collections?
Well, currently I'm not. Currently we are doing checks on collections. And so all the fossils are safe. We have already taken care of all of that. That's actually part of normal daily life anyway. So for the time being, unfortunately, collections are currently closed to visiting researchers and just for precautions during COVID. So luckily I have a good collection of casts and reference material that help me. But for collection management, I'm actually doing what the Triceratops is on a desk full of files. I've been doing a lot of backup digitization of the last 30 years of MOR records. So that's how I have been helping out with collections, has been to take care of the less glamorous paperwork side of things.
Sounds like a lot of work. LGBT Rex asks, did anything special have to happen in the gut after these creatures eat literal bones?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. I would love to. Did they have anything special happening in the gut? I would assume that they would have had to have some sort of technique, though obviously because of that paper that I was telling you about, the proof is in the poopin', that they're not fully digesting a lot of that actual hard bone material. So they're maybe getting the marrow and some other parts out of it, but a lot is completely undigested as well. But that's a fascinating question. I would definitely look at like a comparative method and look at hyenas and look at the digestive system of hyenas as kind of a reference point to be able to infer what's going on in Borophagines. Great question.
Yeah. Let's see. Primordial Rose asked, is it known if protoceratids would have been on a Borophagines menu?
Oh, probably protoceratids. Yeah, Borophagines, I think they do have a lot in common with, say, T-Rex, where I'm like, people are like, what did T-Rex eat? And I'm like, anything it wanted to eat. I kind of think that Borophagines were in that category too, that they were definitely at the top of their food chain. They were outcompeted by modern canines. So their other competitors were like other dogs and maybe some of the bigger cats at some point. But I'm sure they ate whatever they could. And especially they probably scavenged some too, or fought off smaller dogs for it or other animals for it as well. So.
For sure. Let's see. Yellow Panda 2001 asks, weren't there some Borophagines that were out of the typical bone-crushing dog form?
Yes. So Borophagines, we could look at them kind of on a spectrum of morphology, if you will, too. We have your really hypercarnivorous fauna, which are things like alluridon and epicyon. They go really, really towards that hyena-like dentition. And then on the other end of things, like desmocyon, we have, which is like that little dog, more fox-like and looking very much more like an omnivorous diet, if not more completely herbivorous in some cases too, foraging a lot of nuts, berries, leaves, twigs, and that. So we really do run the gamut with bone crushing dogs. And you've probably seen your own dogs do weird things like eat grass, and you're like, why are you eating grass? It doesn't, your teeth are, that's weird. So I do think that we see dogs that are needing to do a whole bunch of different things in their ecosystem to be able to get the right nutrients, and they just have specialized in different ways. And yes, we definitely have very, very small fox-like borophagines that are doing a very omnivorous diet. We've got middle of the ground borophagines like 8673 here is more of a moderate one. And then we have like alluridon, who's doing the full hypercarnivorous thing too. So lots and lots of diversity within the borophagines. Lots of research to be done.
For sure. Let's see. Derek Den Ouden asks, is it possible that the climate volatility of the middle Miocene, either the climatic optimum or the transition, contributed to the decline of the Hesperocyoninae? And if so, why?
Oh, that is a great question. I mean, again, it's pretty hard to tease out for an extinction event whether it was one direct cause or a cacophony of causes, if you will. So I think that what we could look at is that by the middle Miocene, those climatic conditions are making it more hospitable for modern canines, which are now on the scene, and they're out competing those Hesperocyonines. So the climate, I'm sure, played a role in the success of certain clades like the canines that then out competed the Hesperocyonines, and then eventually out competed the Borophagines as well. So it's hard to say what specific factor led to their demise, and it's very interesting to think about all of the different factors that could have played a role.
Sure. A lot of great questions today.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys. I know Karen Chin is up next, and her work is fantastic, and I'm excited to hear about it. So hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, leave me a comment, shoot me a tweet. And I'm always down to talk more dogs. These have been great questions. And I want to thank everyone for coming out and the organizers for doing all this, and everybody should go donate.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Amy.
Thank you for having me, everyone. Woohoo! Enjoy the rest of the live streams.
Woo.
Bye.
Bye.